Okay, the title of the Quran, of his translation, is The Quran, the Final Book of God, a clear English translation of the glorious Quran. His title of his presentation is Desiderata in Doing and Evaluating a Quran Translation. Dr. Daoud Peachy is an accomplished American philologist and dedicated educator with a deep-rooted passion for languages and cultures. Having converted to Islam in 1981, he possesses a diverse academic background, including a Ph.D. in Turcology, Near Eastern Studies, and Central Asian History from Indiana University. Over the course of his remarkable career spanning nearly 5 decades, he has taught English, Turkish, Farsi, and Arabic in various countries, but notably in Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Turkey, at both universities and intermediate levels, with an exceptional academic journey that includes teaching positions at renowned institutions such as King Saud University and Druze University. Dr. Peachy has shaped the linguistic skills and cultural understanding of countless students. He has served in key leadership roles, including as a program coordinator and director of English language units, further demonstrating his commitment to fostering excellence in education. His expertise in language, teaching, and vast experience in the Middle East make him an invaluable asset to our conference. We welcome you, Dr. Peachy.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much for your nice introduction. Very kind of you. The title of my translation, I'll get right into it. The desiderata, the desirable things of doing a translation and evaluating a translation. And in answering that, in determining what these desiderata are, we have to determine the roles of why, by whom, for whom, and how a Quran translation is done. And I noticed that a lot of the topics which I'm going to be mentioning today, Dr. Safi has already mentioned. So it's going to be a little bit of parallel track here. What is the purpose of any translation? What need is met by a Quranic translation? A translation is required when a target audience wants or needs to get information or a message contained in a medium that they do not understand. That is, when the original language cannot convey the communication, or when an individual or group wants to transmit information or a message to a target audience whose medium of understanding is different than that of the original. To extend this argument, when a translation does not convey the information or message because the style and phrasing of the conveyance is different from the style and phrasing that the target audience can process, then that translation is useless. If one wants to deliver a message to a target audience in contemporary Spain, or yet, does one deliver that in the dialect of Mexico or South America, or yet in Ladino, the archaic 15th century Spanish dialect, now spoken only by a small Jewish community in Istanbul? The message of Islam is meant to be universal. However, the original and only medium of that message, accepted to most of the 1.5 billion believers, is a language most people in the world do not understand. The original audience of the scripture understood the clear Arabic very well, even if they did not converse in it. That Arabic had a special high style, yet Allah apparently expected the message to be understood by all who spoke the languages and the dialects of the Arabic family as mother tongues, or the Arabs of the Arabian Peninsula and the Levant. Those Arabic tongues were largely oral media, and most of their speakers were illiterate. The Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, could neither read nor write. It is clear from the Quran that Allah did not expect full comprehension of its reading or recitation. He instituted a first reader, that is a model reciter and interpreter in the person of his final messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The two foundations of Islam, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, form the basis of and provide the primary driving force for all Quranic translation. The Quran has 25 verses that contain the words meaning message, messages, delivery. The first such verse is quite clear in the matter. Messenger, make known what has been sent down to you from your Lord, for if you do not do it, you will not have delivered his message. That's quite clear, isn't it? Towards the end of his farewell sermon to more than 100,000 pilgrims, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ explicitly passed that message, that responsibility, on to his followers. Indeed, I've left among you the book of God. If you follow it, you shall never go astray. Let those who've witnessed it take it to those absent, for many of them may mind it better than those who have already heard it. And he put up his finger and asked them, have I lived up to the trust? And they affirmed that he had. That is crucial. He passed it on to Muslims. We know that there weren't going to be any prophets after him. So it's up to us Muslims to spread that message now. All speakers or comprehenders of the clear Arabic, that is the Arabic, were the target audience for the Quranic message. By the time of the death of Muhammad in 632 of the Common Era, the Arabian Peninsula comprised a new Muslim state with its brain at Medina and its heart in Mecca. However, soon afterwards, during the reigns of the four companion successors, the rightly guarded caliphs, that state had grown into an empire and included people whose mother tongues were not Arabic, and most of whom were not even Semitic. Even the Arabic languages and dialects, which had not been uniform before, became that much more diverse under the influence of the then dominant international languages, the most important of which were Aramaic, Classical Greek, and Old Persian. Along with these languages came their strong literary traditions and alien cultures. Whether or not the idiom of the translation is current or obsolete, with the translation from one language to another comes an inevitable unwanted change in meaning. The literary tools of Quranic Arabic are not fully available in other languages. And when those that are available are employed, they do not always have the same effect as such devices in Quranic Arabic. Words alone are difficult enough to translate to another language. But inflection, rhyme, alliteration, word order, ellipsis, and other aspects of grammar and style are usually more difficult, often impossible to render. Each new would-be translator makes the effort to do a better job than those of his predecessors, whom he finds inadequate in some important way. Many Muslims have claimed that translation of the Quran is impossible. Many of the translators, both Muslim and non-Muslim alike, who have tried to give the sense of the Quran in English have admitted that a translation equal to the Quran in quality and impact is impossible. Nevertheless, new translations continue to be published. The paradox, however, is only apparent. They are really admitting that the result of their efforts to translate the Quran are not and can never be the Quran. Muslims hold it to be inimitable, miraculous. The Quran challenged the doubters to produce a single chapter like any of its chapters, and more than 1,400 years later, no one of note has tried, let alone succeeded in doing so. The personal motivations of translators and the quality of their translations are varied, yet the common factor in all of these subsequent translations, particularly in English, and all English translations up to the present, has been the perception that preceding translations have not measured up to the standard of the original, the Quran. Previous translations have been considered weak, inaccurate, biased, or antiquated, and lately too simple, too complex, too literal, or too liberal. Muhammad Marmaduke Pickthall, the first Muslim from the West to translate the Quran, referred to the revelation as that inimitable symphony, the very sounds of which move men to tears and ecstasy. Is it then no wonder that each new translation has failed to measure up to that noble book? There is another important factor underlying the dissatisfaction with existing translations. The Arabic of the Quran has remained the same, preserved by millions of its memorizers and hundreds of millions of its copies in every language used to translate it, has undergone a great change. Even translations published in the early 20th century are now difficult to understand for many whose mother tongue is English. While the language of the Quran is fixed forever, the translations must be continually redone in the current idiom of the group that is to read it, that is the target audience. Let's take a look at the Yusuf Ali translation of the 5th, 6th, and 7th verses of the Fatiha. Thee do we worship, and thine aid we seek. Show us the straight way, the way of those on whom thou hast bestowed thy grace, those whose portion is not wrath, and who go not astray. The above verses employ 4 archaic, that is obsolete words: thee for you, thine for your, thou for you, hast for have. In the 5th verse, we see 2 abnormal inversions of standard English syntax. Thee do we worship instead of we worship thee, and thine aid we seek instead of we seek thine aid. In the first line of the 7th verse, there's another example of formal style, on whom. And in the second line of the same verse, we see an example of formal high diction, bestowed thy grace. These lines could be rendered in simple, clear English as something like those you have favored. In the last line of the 7th verse, we see another archaic grammatical form, and who go not astray instead of who do not go astray. I'll skip over this other examples of this archaic style. Muslims have been given the duty to spread the message of the glorious Quran to the best of their ability. The message is universal and meant for all mankind, but as all mankind does not understand the clear classical Arabic of the Quran, the message must in some way be put in a form that all can comprehend. This provides a very strong answer to why these attempts at translation must be made. The translation of any literary work, and most especially the Quran, requires a competency in both the language of the original work and that of the target audience. That is, it is all the more important that those by whom it is translated and conveyed be competent, and that they possess the knowledge and skills required to do so. In addition, those for whom the translation is intended must be carefully considered. The language used must be that which can be easily understood. In this case, the message itself must take precedence over the style of the language, although the language should reflect the contemporary usage in usage and vocabulary. This is not always easy, and the translator must tackle many difficulties to decide how best to convey the message.